Well, we'll start, as always, with the Premier League review. James, you were at Stamford Bridge for Chelsea-Arsenal. Bit of an odd one, because I imagine that before the game, Arsenal might have taken a point and just gone on and kind of moved on to different games. But having played against 10 men for so long, they probably left feeling like they maybe missed out a little bit.
Yeah, and it also obviously comes at the end of a long week for them, where they've beaten Spurs, they've beaten Bayern, and looked very good in both of those games. And I'm sort of always conscious that I think there's a lot of Arsenal fans who think that there's a sort of media landscape out there either against them or waiting for them to fail. I think it's just a case of, because they haven't seen it out, because they obviously haven't won the league in 20 years, the chinks in the armour look a bit more obvious, and you go looking for them in a way that you wouldn't if we were talking about, prime City under Pep or, Liverpool under Klopp. The fact of the matter is they played 52 minutes with 11 against 10, and they had 8 shots in the whole game, which I think was the fewest they've recorded in it might even be this season, but certainly for some time. So for me, it just fell into that category of Liverpool away in August and City at home in September, where you thought, go on then, go and do it. You've got they're vulnerable. Arsenal can go and win these games, and if you go and win either of those games, you make such a huge statement about who you are and how serious you can be about the title this year. And they just didn't quite do it in either of those games. They obviously lost a tight game at Anfield. They nearly lost to City, equalising in the last minute. And then again yesterday, they kind of, they were so close to winning. They had a chance right at the death where Timber takes it off Gyökeres's head. But you never got the sense in the stadium that it was 11v10 really, and that was credit to Chelsea in the way that they played. I thought they were so good. Reece James incredible in midfield, Enzo Fernandez alongside him. The running that those guys did, the fact that Pedro Neto and then Garnacho, when he came on in the second half, really stretched Arsenal going the other way, gave them something to think about. It never felt as though it was 11v10, one team camped on the edge of their own box trying to just last ditch tackle. It never got to that stage. And I don't think there's any criticism, particularly of Mikel Arteta this time, because I think he made positive changes. Maybe could have brought Gyökeres on a bit earlier. We're going to talk about strikers later on, but that might be one you think, do you not give your number 9 a bit more than 18 minutes, even though he's only just come back from injury? But he brought Eze on. He brought Odegaard on. He brought Odegaard on. He took Eze off. He made changes to go and try and influence the game, but they just didn't quite have that killer instinct, and that maybe is the only question left about them. Now, it might not matter, because they're already 5 points clear, and there might not be another team that can put together the consistency to take advantage of that. But if you're just talking about a team that's not won it for 20 years and they have to answer those questions, then that is a question they still haven't answered.
Well, I read the piece that you and Mark put together from Stamford Bridge, and you kind of referenced it there, that we've got this kind of tendency when these big games come around to say it's a chance to make a statement, it's a chance to kind of set yourself apart from the rest of the challenging pack. But if Arsenal are going to be so dominant with the rest of in games against the rest of the Premier League, does it matter that they don't beat Chelsea, that they don't beat City? Could they go this season without having that big statement win, but still win the Premier League?
Yes, for 2 reasons, I think. One is that the league isn't as strong this year. I mean, all right, it's only 13 games, so perhaps we're judging it a little prematurely, but it doesn't look as strong as it's been to me. And secondly, you've got to look at Arsenal's sort of history in these fixtures. Now, they have a very good record actually against Chelsea, so that doesn't really apply here. But their record traditionally against the Big Six, particularly if you think about their record against City, they just go and get hammered by City home and away for years, really. And I know it's been a real focus internally at Arsenal that they've wanted to toughen up in those big games. And do you remember there was the game at the Etihad? Was it last season or the season before, 0-0, when they didn't really go for it?
Yeah, they had a chance to go for it, and they kind of...
And at 2-1, 10 men, when they just totally shut the game down and didn't show, just decided they were going to sit on the edge of their own box. And it was all, well, we pay massive respect to Guardiola and City and everything they've done and all this. And all of that was born from the idea of we always lose these games, so a draw is actually a step forward. And you do wonder whether they've looked at the league this year and thought, I'm not saying they go to draw these games, but if they draw against the sort of traditional Big Six and beat everyone else, they're going to win the league, because it doesn't look like it's going to be a league that you have to get 95 points to win or 100 points to win. And Arteta, I think, I've spoken to him sort of in previous years about points tallies, and it sort of became a bit of a running joke about, you know, how many do you need? Yeah. I think if we asked him that now, he wouldn't say 95 points, because it's just the league isn't strong enough for another team to push them that close. So yeah, they could do it, and so that's why I don't think there's any massive recriminations from Sunday. It's not as if we're you know, there's some big inquest about, you know, bottle or mentality or anything like that. I think they just thought, well, Chelsea, to their credit, are still posing us a problem going the other way. Yeah. So they didn't really change shape. They dropped Declan Rice into a holding midfield position, then played with sort of two more attacking eights rather than having the balance that they have with Rice and then Zubimendi in behind. So, you know, they sort of tweaked it rather than threw everything in the kitchen sink at Chelsea, because they knew that they could get done. And imagine what we'd been writing if they'd lost that game 10-11, you know, for almost an hour. So yeah, I suppose it's a good point. It just clips the lead a little into 5.
Interesting.
That's the only thing. You just think 6 into 5, and then with suddenly a defeat out of nowhere could become 2, and you're talking about Christmas being very, very sort of tight and tense again. But no, I think overall they'll be pretty comfortable where they are.
Just a word on Chelsea then. I went to watch Chelsea at Burnley, the first game back after the international break. It was 12:30 at Burnley. You know, typical tough place to go. Nice cliche. I thought they were quite solid. They were professional. They were the better team. They made chances. They deserved to win the game. I was actually quite impressed about the way that they went about it. They looked like a far more mature team than perhaps I'd given them credit for. Did you see enough at Stamford Bridge in those circumstances against that Arsenal team to suggest that Chelsea could last the course in this title race?
I don't think they'll win the league. I think they're ahead of where we thought they would be. I can tell you that the internal expectation is Champions League qualification. They're not expecting a title push this season. And it's funny because, you know, I think Maresca's been, you know, he's world champion. He obviously got them into the Champions League this season. They won the Conference League. And yet there's still been this sort of reluctance to really embrace him, I think, from Chelsea fans. And there's been a concern about the style of football, whether it's a bit too conservative, whether they're sort of playing out from the back almost for the sake of it, functional rather than, you know, sort of flair. But I think what we're seeing now is a real evolution and a real trust from these players, because, you know, he has, like a lot of teams, to be fair, this season, but they have had to deal with a lot of injuries, and they were Cole Palmer FC 2 years ago. Yeah. You know, they were reliant on one guy, even last year, heavily reliant on one guy to deliver for them in the final third. And they've obviously been without him since September when he got injured at Old Trafford. And he was on the bench on Sunday, and you sort of, I remember writing in the live blog, actually, you could almost see Maresca thinking, shall I throw him on? I want his individual quality. He could go and win us the game out of nowhere, but we're set up in this way. We've got Delap up top and 2 speedy wingers outside to help us get out, and break the Arsenal press and try and counter-attack and offer something going the other way. And if I bring Palmer on, who's not particularly quick and obviously couldn't hold the ball up as a 9, it breaks up the dynamic. Yeah. So what do you do? And he decided to leave him on the bench. And the sort of idea of going without Palmer, even in those circumstances, would have been unthinkable, you know, even last season. So I think it sort of shows that there's a real evolution there. There's a togetherness there. I think Enzo Fernandez is starting to really justify that huge fee that they paid for him. I thought Reece James was incredible in midfield, and, you know, it's now been, I think, a year since he's last suffered a serious injury. So there's a real hope, although I noticed Maresca after the game was asked directly, you know, Reece James was brilliant. Can he go and do that again on Wednesday at Leeds? And he just went, no, he can't, because he's just not sort of physically in a place where he can go and churn that kind of performance out every 3 days. But yeah, but there's a real sense of something building there. You look at the profile of the squad, you look at the fact that you're not sure about Robert Sanchez as a goalkeeper. They still need a centre-back. Up front, you could argue they probably haven't got the right centre forward yet, or certainly not one that's going to score them the 20 goals they might need. Yeah, so they still need a bit of work, but I've watched most of Arsenal's games this season, and they gave them 10v11 as good a game as anyone has. You know, they were very, very good.